The Union of Civilized Worlds had marked Kurnath 7 as strictly off-limits, a red zone on every navigational chart, surrounded by warnings in every known language. Rumors of the Vorax, gigantic, cold-blooded predators capable of tearing through steel and bone-haunted space travelers like ghost stories told to frighten children. But for Dr. Elias Rain, a young human xenobiologist with more curiosity than caution, the mystery of Karnath 7 was too tempting to resist. Unlike others who feared the stories, Elias believed that no species could be pure evil. He thought the Vorax might not be the monsters everyone claimed they were. Against all orders, and without official approval, he launched a solo expedition, traveling silently through deep space in a small scout ship until he reached the swirling, storm-wrapped planet. As he descended into the atmosphere, violent winds rocked his vessel, and heavy electrical interference made communication impossible. A sudden lightning strike knocked out part of the controls, forcing him into a crash landing deep within the dense alien jungle. Bruised and shaken but alive, Elias stepped out into a world of glowing plants, thick vines, and eerie silence. Every sound felt like a whisper of danger, every shadow like a threat. His scanner showed movement nearby, but he couldn't tell what it was. For days, Elias built a small shelter using parts of his ship and began collecting samples. Though constantly alert, he noticed something strange. He was being watched. Every night, he saw golden eyes in the darkness, just beyond the reach of his light. At first, fear gripped him, but the eyes never moved to attack. They simply observed. Then one evening, as the sun dipped below the tree line and the jungle shimmered with bioluminescence, Elias heard slow, heavy footsteps. He turned, heart racing, to see the creature stepping into the open. It stood over 10 feet tall, covered in scaled armor like skin, with arms thick as tree trunks and claws that could slice through metal. Its gaze was locked on him, but it did not charge. It stood still, breathing steadily, tilting its head as if trying to understand what it saw. Elias froze, too scared to move, but somehow he sensed hesitation. The Vorax could have killed him in an instant, but it didn't. Slowly, Elias reached into his bag and pulled out a nutrient bar, placing it gently on the ground and backing away. The creature remained still for a moment, then took a single step forward, sniffed the air, and with surprising gentleness, picked up the offering. It examined the bar, sniffed again, then swallowed it whole. Without a sound, it turned and disappeared back into the jungle. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. His hands trembled not from fear, but from wonder. What had just happened? The next day, he repeated the action, leaving food outside his shelter. And again, the Vorax came. This time it stayed longer, its golden eyes studying him with intelligence that no one had ever mentioned in any report. Elias started calling it Scairn, not knowing whether it was a name or just a label to make the presence feel less terrifying. Each day, Scairn returned. The two beings, one human, one predator, watched each other, shared simple exchanges, and slowly began to form an unspoken bond. Elias noticed that Scairn never made threatening movements, never growled, and always waited until Elias stepped back before approaching. There was a pattern, a strange respect. As days turned into a week, Elias ventured further into the jungle, always knowing Scairn was nearby, sometimes just a shadow in the corner of his vision. Once, he found ancient stone carvings hidden behind thick vine symbols that looked like language. Could the Vorax have once had a civilization? He documented everything, his hands shaking with excitement. No one had ever gotten this close, let alone discovered signs of intelligence or history. But one night, as he reviewed his notes inside his shelter, his scanner picked up something new, two fast-moving signals approaching from the west. He rushed outside just in time to see a second Vorax leap from the shadows. This one looked different, thinner, faster, and far more aggressive. Elias stumbled back, expecting to be torn apart, but before the creature reached him, Scairn came crashing through the trees, colliding with the attacker in a violent explosion of movement and fury. The battle was brutal, the sounds of claws and roars echoing through the jungle. Scairn overpowered the other Vorax, sending it fleeing into the night. Elias, breathless and stunned, looked at the wounded Scairn. The creature turned to him, its chest rising and falling, and for a moment, they stared at each other, two beings from different worlds, bound now by something deeper than fear. Elias stepped forward carefully and raised his hands in thanks. Skarn didn't move. The next morning, Elias recorded a short message and attempted to send it to the Union, unsure if the signal would escape the planet's interference. "They're not what we thought," he said. "The Vorax, they remember." Just as he sent the message, a faint alarm blinked on his damaged console. Unidentified ship detected entering orbit. Elias's heart sank. He didn't know if it was rescue or retaliation. But one thing was clear: his discovery had just become far more dangerous than he ever imagined. For days after the fierce battle in the jungle, Elias remained with Skarn, the Vorax who had saved him from death. Skarn did not leave Elias's side. Instead, the giant creature moved slowly around the small shelter, always alert and protective. Elias felt a strange calm whenever Skarn was near. The predator that others feared across the galaxy showed no sign of aggression toward him. Each morning, Elias would carefully step outside, offering food and water, and each time Skarn accepted these gifts without hesitation. The golden eyes, once terrifying, now seemed full of quiet intelligence and curiosity. Elias was amazed to see how Skarn used his massive claws gently, never breaking the fragile plants or the small equipment Elias used for his research. It was clear to Elias that Skarn understood something deep, something no one else had noticed before. As Elias explored the jungle, he discovered many strange symbols carved into the rocks, hidden beneath vines and moss. The markings were like letters or pictures, telling stories in shapes and lines. It was the first proof Elias had found that the Vorax were not just mindless beasts, but once had a culture, a way of life. Elias worked to copy the symbols, sketching and photographing them. Each night, he sat by the fire and thought about what could have happened to turn the Vorax into monsters. He remembered the old stories passed down in the Union, stories full of fear and hatred, but now they seemed too simple, too wrong. One afternoon, as Elias carefully studied the symbols, Skarn approached with slow, heavy step. This time, Skarn made small sounds, low grunts and clicks that Elias had never heard before. At first, the sounds were confusing, but Elias listened closely and noticed a rhythm like the beats of a strange song. Trying to respond, Elias made soft noises in return. Slowly, over days, they developed a simple way to communicate gestures, sounds, and even touch. Skarn would touch Elias's arm with surprising gentleness, and Elias would nod or smile. The bond between them grew stronger. It was no longer just man and predator. It was friendship in the wildest sense. Yet, the jungle was not always peaceful. One evening, while Elias was gathering water near a fast-moving stream, a second Vorax appeared from the shadows, lean, fast, and filled with hostile energy. Elias had no time to react before the creature lunged at him. He barely managed to dodge, falling hard to the ground. Pain surged through his side, and he knew he could not fight. Just as the attacker prepared to strike, a thunderous roar echoed through the trees. Skarn appeared, running with power and speed that belied his size. The two Vorax collided in a fierce battle, claws tearing through flesh and scales. Elias crawled back slowly, fear tightening his chest, but also a strange hope. Skarn fought with everything he had to protect him, pushing the enemy back until the attacker fled into the darkness. After the fight, Skarn returned to Elias, his breathing heavy, wounds visible but not life-threatening. Elias reached out, gently touching Skarn's rough skin, grateful beyond words. That night, as Elias cared for his own injuries and tended to Skarn's wounds with what little medical supplies he had, he understood something important. Skarn was not a mindless killer. He was a protector, a guardian, perhaps the last hope for his species. The idea that a deadly predator could be a friend was hard to accept, but Elias felt it deep inside. Days passed, and Elias and Skarn grew closer, learning from each other in ways no one could have imagined. Elias found that Skarn's behavior followed patterns, almost like rules. The Vorax had their own code, a way of living that respected life in the jungle. Elias documented everything carefully, hoping to prove to the Union that the truth was not as simple as they believed. However, Elias knew time was running out. His earlier message to the Union, telling them the Vorax remembered their past, had not gone unnoticed. He saw distant ships in the sky, scanned, that grew closer and more persistent. The Union forces would not let this secret spread without control. One evening, as Elias sat beside the fire, Scairn suddenly became alert, ears twitching, body tense. Elias followed his gaze and saw bright lights moving through the trees, a patrol from the Union, armed and searching. Elias's heart pounded. He knew that if they found Scairn, they would destroy him without hesitation. Quickly, Elias packed his few belongings and whispered to Scairn to follow. The giant Vorax moved silently beside him, both aware of the danger ahead. They slipped through the thick jungle, avoiding patrols, shadows among shadows. Elias felt the weight of responsibility. He carried not just his own life, but the fate of Scairn and the truth behind the Vorax. As they moved deeper into the forest, Elias's mind raced. What would happen if the Union captured him? Would they believe his story? Could they ever accept a friendship between man and predator? The questions weighed heavily, but Elias pushed forward, driven by hope and courage. That night, as they hid in a small cave, Elias and Scairn shared a quiet moment. Elias reached into his pack and pulled out a small glowing device he had found in the carvings, a strange key covered in symbols. Scairn sniffed the object and touched it gently with a claw, as if recognizing its importance. Elias realized this device might hold the answers to the Vorax history, their lost civilization, and the key to peace. But the danger was not over. The Union patrols were closing in, and soon, Elias and Scairn would have to face a choice: surrender to fear and fight, or risk everything to change the galaxy's understanding forever. In the darkness of the cave, two unlikely allies prepared for a future uncertain, bound by trust in a world where friendship between man and beast was the greatest shock of all. The dense jungle of Carnath 7 seemed to close in tighter around Elias and Scairn as the days passed, the danger from the Union patrols pressing ever closer, like shadows creeping toward dawn. Elias knew that every moment he stayed on this forbidden planet was a risk not only to himself, but also to Scairn and the fragile bond they had built. The strange glowing device he had found in the ancient carvings, what he now called the key, was their only hope to unlock the truth behind the Vorax lost civilization, and, maybe, find a way to protect the species from total extinction. But the key also held a secret so dangerous that if it fell into the wrong hands, it could trigger a galaxy-wide conflict that no one was prepared for. Elias carefully studied the symbols etched into the device, trying to decode their meaning with the limited tools he had. Scairn sat close, watching with those deep golden eyes that seemed to understand far more than any creature should. One morning, as a fierce storm swept over the planet, Elias and Scairn took shelter in a narrow cave system he had discovered near a towering cliff. The storm's howling winds and pounding rain outside created a sharp contrast to the eerie silence inside, where only the faint drip of water echoed. Elias's mind raced with questions. How had the Vorax fallen from a civilization capable of creating such intricate technology to become feared monsters? Was it punishment for some ancient crime? Or had they been betrayed by their own? The answers were hidden somewhere in the depths of Carnath 7, waiting to be uncovered. But time was running out. The Union ships now orbited closer, sending scouting drones that searched the jungle with merciless efficiency. Elias heard the distant hum of their engines on the wind and felt the weight of being hunted pressing down on his shoulders. Scairn remained calm but alert, his body tense like a coiled spring. Elias realized that the creature's instinct was not just to survive but to protect him at all costs. He wondered if Scairn saw himself as more than a predator, more than a beast. Could the Vorax be capable of loyalty, even love? The thought seemed impossible just weeks ago. One evening, as Elias worked by the faint glow of a makeshift lamp, a sharp noise startled him. The cave's entrance trembled as heavy footsteps approached Union soldiers, no doubt. Panic gripped Elias's chest, but Scairn was already moving, positioning himself between Elias and the danger. The massive creature let out a low growl that vibrated through the cave walls, a warning that sent a shiver through Elias. He knew there was no way to fight off the soldiers here. The terrain favored the hunters. But Skarn's presence was a terrifying force on its own. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the cave's mouth, a voice Elias recognized. Elias Rain, you are ordered to surrender immediately. This is a Union enforcement unit. Resistance will be met with lethal force. Elias's heart pounded. Could the Union understand the truth he was trying to reveal? Did they know about Skarn? Slowly, Elias stepped forward, raising his hands. Skarn's growl softened, but his eyes never left the soldiers. The leader of the unit, a cold-eyed officer in a black uniform, advanced carefully. You're trespassing on a forbidden world, she said sharply, and consorting with a dangerous predator. That creature will be destroyed. You will come with us. Elias glanced at Skarn, who took a step back, but did not flee. For a moment, man and beast stood together, silent allies against an impossible threat. Elias made a decision. Wait, he said firmly. I have proof that the Vorax are more than just monsters. They have a history, a culture, and a right to live. If you kill Skarn, you will destroy the last chance for peace. The officer's eyes narrowed. Peace? With a creature that could kill us all? Elias held up the key, the strange glowing device. This is part of their past. It can change everything. Let me show you. For tense minutes, the soldiers debated. Then, surprisingly, the officer nodded. You have 5 minutes. Show us this proof, or we take the creature and leave. Elias worked quickly, connecting his damaged equipment to the device. Lights flickered, and suddenly the cave was bathed in strange holographic images, scenes of a civilization lost in time, images of Vorax cities, temples, and people who looked nothing like the monsters the galaxy feared. The soldiers stared in stunned silence. Elias explained what he had learned. The Vorax once had advanced technology and a complex society, but some disaster or betrayal had reduced them to survival predators. The key contained information that might help restore their honor and save them from extinction. As the last image faded, the officer stepped forward. This changes everything, she said quietly. But the Union will not accept this easily. There are those who want the Vorax wiped out, fearing what they represent. Elias nodded grimly. I know. That is why we must act fast. Suddenly, an alarm blared outside the cave. A patrol had discovered their location. The soldiers scrambled to prepare, but Elias and Skarn stood ready. The price of discovery was clear. To protect the truth, they would have to fight, or find a way to escape and share their knowledge with the galaxy. As the jungle trembled with the approach of hostile forces, Elias and Skarn braced themselves for the battle ahead, two unlikely allies united by hope, courage, and the promise of a future no one had dared to imagine. The jungle air was thick with tension as Elias and Skarn prepared to face the Union forces that had suddenly surrounded their cave. The revelation of the Vorax history through the glowing key had sent ripples through the ranks of the soldiers and their commanders, but not everyone was ready to accept the truth. Powerful leaders in the Union feared the change this knowledge could bring, worried that the fragile balance of control would be shattered if the Vorax were seen as more than savage predators. Elias understood this better than anyone. The galaxy was built on fear and power, and those who ruled would fight fiercely to keep their grip, even if it meant destroying what was good and true. As the soldiers closed in, Elias whispered to Skarn, "It's the only hope for peace." Skarn's massive head nodded, the golden eyes glowing softly in the dim light. Suddenly, the cave mouth exploded with flashes of light and the sharp crack of gunfire. The patrol had begun their attack. Elias dropped low, pulling Skarn down behind a jagged rock. The bullets pinged against stone and twisted metal, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Skarn growled, his powerful body tensing as he prepared to defend. Elias knew that fighting the Union soldiers head-on would be suicide. Their weapons were far more advanced, their numbers overwhelming. Instead, he decided to use the jungle itself as a weapon. "Follow me," he whispered urgently, grabbing a makeshift map from his pack. With Skarn leading the way, they slipped through secret passages and hidden tunnels Elias had discovered during his explorations. The jungle was alive with sounds, the calls of strange birds, the rustle of leaves, the distant roar of rivers. But the real threat was close behind. The soldiers were relentless, using drones to scan the terrain and spot their every move. Elias's heart pounded as he thought of how close they were to losing everything. Suddenly, Scairn stopped. His ears twitched, and his body lowered to the ground. Elias looked up just in time to see a drone hovering overhead, its bright sensors sweeping the jungle floor. With a roar, Scairn leapt into action, smashing the drone with a crushing blow of his massive paw. The device exploded, sending sparks and smoke into the humid air. Elias felt a surge of hope. If Scairn could protect him from technology, maybe there was a chance yet. But the soldiers were closing in fast, their boots pounding on the earth like thunder. Elias pushed forward, deeper into the jungle's heart. He hoped to reach the ancient Vorax temple he had seen in the holograms, the place where the key might unlock its full power. As they traveled, Elias thought about the larger battle beyond the jungle. The Union was not just fighting to capture them, it was fighting to maintain a galaxy shaped by fear and ignorance. The truth threatened the very foundations of their power. If the Vorax were allowed to live and rebuild their civilization, many would lose influence, and wars would be fought to keep the past buried. Elias felt the weight of history on his shoulders. This was no longer just about survival, it was about changing the course of the galaxy's future. Along the way, Elias and Scairn encountered other dangers: hostile wildlife, poisonous plants, and the jungle's treacherous terrain. But none were as threatening as the soldiers hunting them. The Union forces were relentless, using all their tools to find them. At one point, Elias barely escaped a trap set with high-tech nets that could immobilize even Scairn. The predator's strength tore through the netting, but the danger was a clear warning. The soldiers would stop at nothing. One night, as they rested near a bubbling stream, Elias examined the key once more. He found new symbols glowing faintly as if reacting to the ancient temple's location. He believed the temple held answers, maybe a way to restore the Vorax honor, or even to communicate with the galaxy in a way that would end the cycle of violence. Scairn rested nearby, his breathing steady but alert. Elias felt a strange peace in that moment, a fragile calm before the coming storm. But the peace did not last long. Before dawn, a squad of soldiers found their camp. Elias woke to the crackle of radios and the snap of branches. He grabbed the key and shook Scairn awake. The predator was ready, his body coiled to attack. The soldiers burst into the clearing, weapons raised. Elias stepped forward, holding the key high. "Stop!" he shouted. "You don't understand what this is. It's not just a weapon. It's a message. A chance for peace." The soldiers hesitated, unsure. Then the squad leader barked orders. "Capture them alive. Bring the key back for analysis." Scairn roared and charged, knocking several soldiers aside with terrifying power. Elias fired a flare into the air, signaling to their distant allies who were still searching. The jungle erupted into chaos gunfire, screams, and the roar of a great beast. Elias fought beside Scairn, using every trick he knew to survive. But the soldiers were well-trained and determined. Slowly, Elias felt their numbers closing in. In a desperate move, he grabbed the key and sprinted toward the temple ruins, hoping to reach safety. Scairn followed, tearing through the underbrush. The temple was a vast structure of stone and metal, covered in vines and glowing symbols. Elias could feel the energy pulsing through the air. He rushed inside, the soldiers just steps behind. Inside, the walls were covered in ancient carvings that told the story of the Vorax, how they had once lived in peace, creating technology that balanced power with nature. Elias touched the key to a carved panel, and suddenly the temple lit up with holographic images, more vivid and detailed than ever before. The soldiers stopped, stunned by the display. Elias turned to them. "This is the truth. The Vorax were betrayed by their own leaders, who used their technology for war. The survivors became outcasts, hunted and feared. But this knowledge can help us heal." For a moment, the soldiers were silent. Then, the squad leader lowered his weapon. "If this is true, then we have been fighting a lie." But not all agreed. Another officer raised his gun, ready to destroy the key and the temple. Scairn leapt in front, a wall of muscle and fury. A fierce battle broke out inside the sacred halls, the ancient stones shaking with the violence. Elias struggled to protect the key, knowing it was the key to peace, but also the source of the greatest danger. In the end, the squad leader made a choice. He called for a ceasefire and ordered the soldiers to stand down. Elias felt a surge of relief. The truth was winning, but the fight for power was far from over. As the sun rose over Karnath 7, Elias and Scairn stood among the ruins, surrounded by soldiers who were no longer enemies but unsure allies. The galaxy had been shaken by the revelation. But for the first time, Elias saw hope, a chance that the deadliest predator in the galaxy could become a friend, and that fear could be replaced by understanding. The struggle between truth and power was just beginning, and the future depended on what they did next. The dawn over Karnath 7 brought with it a fragile calm that felt almost unreal after the chaos of the previous night. But Elias knew better than to trust peace so easily. The soldiers who had laid down their weapons were still uncertain, their faces a mixture of confusion, fear, and cautious hope. And while the squad leader seemed ready to accept the truth of the Vorax history and the possibility of a new alliance, others within the Union command were already sending urgent messages to higher authorities, warning that such revelations could unravel their entire control over the galaxy. Elias felt the weight of this fragile moment pressing down on him as he looked at Scairn, who stood silently beside him, the once feared predator now a symbol of hope and mystery. The temple's holographic images still flickered softly on the walls, showing stories of the Vorax ancient civilization, their knowledge, and their suffering, but outside, the world waited impatiently, ready to judge, ready to fight, ready to destroy or embrace. As the soldiers gathered around, Elias began to speak, his voice steady but filled with urgency. We cannot let fear decide the future. The galaxy has suffered too long from hatred and lies. Scairn is not just a monster. He is a survivor, a protector, and perhaps the key to peace. Some of the soldiers nodded slowly, but others exchanged wary glances. Elias understood that trust was not something given freely. It had to be earned. The next few days were tense as negotiations and discussions unfolded beneath the watchful eyes of both humans and Vorax alike. Elias worked tirelessly to build understanding, explaining the true nature of Scairn's species, their culture, and the tragedy that had made them outcasts. Scairn, for his part, showed surprising patience and intelligence, learning to communicate more clearly with Elias and even responding to gestures from some curious soldiers. But the galaxy beyond Karnath 7 was not waiting quietly. News of Elias's discovery and the stunning alliance with the deadliest predator spread like wildfire, igniting fear and fascination across star systems. Political leaders debated fiercely, some calling Elias a hero and visionary, others labeling him a traitor who threatened to weaken humanity's position in the universe. Elias knew that the real challenge was only beginning. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the jungle canopy, Elias received a secret message from an unknown source, warning that a powerful faction within the Union planned to capture Scairn and weaponize his unique abilities. The message was clear. They saw Scairn not as a friend, but as the ultimate weapon to dominate and destroy their enemies. Elias's heart pounded. If this faction succeeded, the fragile trust they had built would shatter, and the galaxy would plunge back into war and fear. Determined to protect Scairn and the truth, Elias gathered a small group of loyal soldiers and Vorax allies to prepare for what might come. They fortified the temple, set traps in the jungle, and honed their skills in stealth and defense. Scairn, sensing the danger, grew even more fierce and protective, his golden eyes glowing with a mixture of warning and resolve. Days later, under the cover of darkness, the faction launched their attack. Armed with advanced weapons and ruthless tactics, they stormed the temple, expecting an easy victory. Instead, they met resistance unlike anything they had imagined. Elias and his team fought fiercely, using the jungle's secrets and Scairn's strength to their advantage. The battle was brutal, echoing through the ancient stones and across the dense forest. Scairn moved with terrifying speed and power, but Elias reminded him to hold back, to show control, not chaos, because this fight was not just physical, it was for the future of all species who could live in peace. At one point, Elias was caught in the crossfire, a blaster shot grazing his arm, but he pressed on, driven by hope and desperation. The attackers underestimated the bond between human and predator, and slowly, the tide turned. The faction's forces retreated, leaving behind a trail of destruction, but also a growing awareness that the galaxy's old ways were no longer enough. In the aftermath, Elias realized that victory had come at a cost. The temple was damaged, and trust remained fragile. More importantly, the larger galaxy outside still feared what it did not understand. To change minds and hearts, Elias would need to take the story beyond Carnath 7. He began planning a journey to the capital worlds, intending to present the evidence of the Vorax's true nature to the Galactic Council, hoping to convince leaders to reconsider their policies of fear and extermination. Alongside Skarn, Elias traveled through star systems, meeting alien species who had long heard rumors of the deadly predator but never seen the gentle strength beneath. With each encounter, Elias's message spread. Fear could be replaced by friendship, and the galaxy's greatest dangers could become its greatest allies. But not everyone welcomed this message. Some planets closed their borders, others sent spies to sabotage their mission, and Elias found himself constantly on guard. Skarn's presence was both a blessing and a curse. It attracted awe and dread in equal measure. Yet, despite the obstacles, Elias never lost faith. The bond between human and Vorax was proof that change was possible. Along the way, Elias uncovered old secrets hidden deep in the galaxy records of ancient wars, forgotten treaties, and lost knowledge that revealed how different species once lived in harmony. This discovery inspired hope that the galaxy's future did not have to repeat the mistakes of the past. As Elias and Skarn stood before the Galactic Council, the tension in the Grand Hall was palpable. Leaders from dozens of worlds watched closely. Elias presented the key and the temple's holograms, explaining the Vorax history and the power of understanding over fear. He urged the council to choose a new path, one that embraced diversity and friendship, rather than domination and war. After long hours of debate, the council agreed to a trial period of peace with the Vorax, allowing them to rebuild their homeworld and contribute to galactic society. Elias and Skarn were named ambassadors of this new era, tasked with guiding the fragile alliance forward. The road ahead remained uncertain. Old wounds and deep suspicions would not heal overnight, and enemies of peace still lurked in the shadows, ready to strike when least expected. But Elias believed in the strength of friendship and the power of hope. The human who shocked the galaxy by befriending its deadliest predator had become a symbol of what was possible when courage met compassion. And as they looked toward the stars, Elias and Skarn knew their journey was only just beginning, one that could change the fate of countless lives and create a galaxy where fear no longer ruled, but friendship and trust flourished.